Hi, I'm Adelia MacWilliam. I live in Cumberland, which is on Vancouver Island, west coast of Canada. And I've been invited to do a reading for Zoomuse, which is happening, my reading is happening next week on September the 11th at 11 a.m. So I just wanted to take a minute and talk about why poetry is important to me. First of all, I just want to say that I think it's really important more than ever in these very strange times for poetry's voice to be heard, because poetry kind of goes against the grain of repression. And for me, I feel like it leads me into Dante's holy forest, which is a kind of reckoning, and into the primal, the source of life. Really, that's how I feel about it. So poetry at its best is a conversation about what we need to let go of for the world to survive, and a singing for freedom. So for me, when I was a kid, I didn't really question why I wrote. I just wrote stories, and then later poetry in journals. I was in love with the Nice Nin. And when I was a teenager, the white space of the page kind of took in my turbulence and transformed it into something that made sense. So for a long time, it was really cathartic. You know, I had a high school English teacher that encouraged me, and really good poets who taught me creative writing at different universities. And then for a long time, I took a break. I was busy raising kids. Life happened. And then recently I got back into, like about 5 years ago, I got back into writing. I wasn't quite sure how to do it. I wanted to give it more room. I did some testing. Then I'll just cry at this point. Okay, here goes. So I was on the floor weeping because I wasn't giving my creativity enough room in my life, and that really woke me up. So also around that time, I had a drink with Paul Nelson at the Empress here in Victoria. And he said, well, maybe you have the duende with you. And then for the last 5 years, I've just been giving it a lot of time. So what have I learned? Well, I've learned poetry is no longer just cathartic for me. It's become my goodness. I think it's because it's so good. And it means a lot to me. The Subud crowd, which I didn't mention, has been the most patient and has really helped. I've done the best readings with them. You know, before I got out into the general public, they were wonderfully supportive, and they still are. So that was my renaissance, which happened about 5 years ago. And so poetry waits for you, which is something I've discovered and I'm really happy about. I've been giving it a lot of time, and poetry did wait. I mean, most poets are terribly into it. It's just one of those things. We're a different breed than the fiction writers, because poetry comes from a different place. So yeah, so most poets they don't all tear up, but you know, it goes pretty deep with them. You can't write poetry without being taken all kinds of places. So yeah. So for me, it's a nice opportunity to get past the artificial. You know, it's got to look good. It's got to be a certain way. That's what it is. It's a collision of worlds. You know, the outer always got to be a certain way. Everything's got to be so, and then the inner feeling, and it's kind of, why it's so hard. I'm going to read you a poem as a teaser. It's a poem that I wrote at the beginning of the pandemic, when it was kind of looming in our lives, and spending a lot of time in a very isolated place and listening to the news and thinking about it. And so I wrote this poem, and it sort of helped put it together for me. So the poem is called April the 2nd, 2020. And it was written after a poem that one of my mentors, Tim Lilburn, wrote, called Retreat. So when I was in Desolation Sound during the pandemic, isolating in that bay, its green tides and evenings and geese, it was so cold in the mornings I'd put on 5 layers, feed the wood stove until the kettle started to tick. I'd stack firewood in the afternoons, the alder bark with its patterns of sepia and gray, overlaid on cream, studded with woodpecker holes, like tiny machine gun bullet holes on an old map, attempting to obliterate the memories of the world we just left behind. And then I'd go rowing out into the Sound to watch the Unwin Mountains walk out of the mist. Also, I was tucking into Calvino's 6 memos for the next millennium. His assertion that literature is an existential function, the search for lightness as a reaction to the weight of living. There was no hockey, the NHL having canceled the season. Indeed, all seasons canceled except for nature's, getting a reprieve with this new quiet. Fish now visible in Venice's canals, gondolas neatly stacked across from the Basilica di San Marco. Early morning fat with rain, remarkable for April. I didn't know exactly what I was lonely for. Inchoate this rite of passage through the world's ruin. So thank you. Yes, Scott, thank you for listening to that. And to say my Zoomuse will be next week. That's 9/11 at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So if you're a different time, do make allowances for that. And I think you can also watch it after the fact as well. I believe so. So thanks.